Welcome.
Thank you.
John, Sue's there to this session. I thought maybe just to start with, seeing we've done our check-in, let's just have a look at the lesson. There's only a couple of paragraphs to read, and then we'll just go into meditation, and then we'll go into discussing the text. How does that sound? Okay, so let me share my screen.
Did you go more into depths of the lesson this afternoon, or?
Yeah, we had some discussion on it.
Okay.
Really deep. We talked about private thoughts and stuff. There's just 2 paragraphs, so let's read those and then we'll meditate on it. Start off with, and so do you want to read the key idea in paragraph 1 for us, Kim?
I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. The idea for today is obviously the reason why your seeing does not affect you alone. You will notice that at times the ideas related to thinking precede those related to perceiving, while at other times the order is reversed. The reason is that the order does not matter. Thinking and its results are really simultaneous, for cause and effect are never separate.
Okay, so anything strike you there?
Yeah, the number 4, thinking and its results are really simultaneous, for cause and effect are never separate.
Yeah, makes sense.
I guess it does somehow. Maybe the simultaneous part, I can see when it's saying, like, you'll notice at times the ideas related to thinking precede those related to perceiving, while other times the order is reversed. But thinking and its results are already simultaneous. I think maybe the simultaneous, and I was thinking about that when I was looking at this morning, is like, I guess it happens and it's maybe we have to like catch it happening, but I don't know how it would be simultaneous.
Well, what he's trying to do is take us beyond time. Let me just share can you see that? If you go into this sent into hell diagram, it's about going outside of this thought system of separation. So if you go into mind, you transcend the domain of cause and effect, where things seem to have time between them, and you're going into pure mind. So saying, well, as you think, so it is. Thinking and its results are really simultaneous if you're just in mind. So you think a thought of separation, and then simultaneously you experience the individuality, the sin, the guilt. It's all happening in the mind. And what the ego's done is it's projected itself out into this physical universe. So we've literally gone out of our minds and then created the illusion of time, which tricks us into believing that there's thinking, and then, well, actually it tricks us in believing there's no thought. We've now become physical, but there seems to be cause and then effect. So I do something and then effects show up in time. So another way of looking at it is this timeline. So we've put ourselves on the timeline, and all of this is about cause and effect. I think, and then down the line there's some effect. And so that gap between cause and effect is what keeps the ego in place. It keeps time in place. And so when he takes us out of this and he's saying, well, actually thinking and its results are already simultaneous, he's taking us beyond the timeline into the mind, saying in mind, cause and its effect are already simultaneous, because the thought and its effect in that domain are simultaneous. So he's trying to collapse our belief in cause and effect on the timeline, and take us into the mind with that statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although I probably would have never thought of it that way. I feel like with explanations yesterday as well, it's like, right, is that what he's actually saying? So I almost feel like I just don't remember some of these lessons when we did it 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how the course goes, which means it's perennial. It's always fresh in your mind because it's like the first time you're seeing it.
Okay.
It's called the goldfish effect.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. There's a goldfish here.
Yeah.
John, do you find?
Yeah, probably more frequent. Probably more frequently than you do, Kim.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's more frequent. I'm like, some stuff.
Did I do this lesson 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So the lesson is, these lessons are deep and they're rich in meaning, and they have this eternal message, and so they never really age. I mean, I've been doing these workbook lessons for 15 years, and yet I can read them, and it's as though I never read them before. I kind of know that I have, but they're fresh, and you do forget the form of them. So you're like, oh, okay, so then you go again, you practice again. So I mean, the beauty of this course, because it's a 1-year course, is you can never really get tired of it, because you'll come around to it in a year and you go, I don't remember this lesson. I don't remember these ideas. I mean, we did discuss all of this because we went through it in detail in June and July.
Yeah.
So you would have, if you attended these sessions, you would have, and I think you were attending most nights, you would have got it. But
yeah, I think that
it comes around again, and you go, okay, I'll look at it again. And so each time you do it, and like another level of understanding, hopefully dawning. So
I used to find it really useful when we had the business, when I felt a kind of stressful meeting coming up, or felt kind of uneasy about people that I was going to be meeting with. If I kind of just spent a bit of time in the morning putting them in the light, it was transformative. It was just staggeringly transformative.
To what? To how it can work.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And things would happen that I could, positive things would happen that I could not have. I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, because I was interested to know your sort of view, John, in terms of, I mean, you've also been doing it for a number of years, the lessons, and I know you've expressed before around like things that you've been picking up also with the text, but yeah, like, I mean, as you've been doing it for the last few months versus when you're doing it like with your business, it sounds to me that you still got the good benefit of it then, and it's, but I think you have the time more to go really more deep into the whole course as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, what I'm finding at the moment is that the lessons are good. Lessons are always good. I'm kind of, I've never spent time studying the text before, so and I'm constantly amazed by the detail of the text, in fact, or the kind of the complexity in a way. I'm looking for a word. It's not quite complexity. It's
nuances.
The nuances. Yeah, the nuances of it. Yeah. I mean, I've read the text for tonight, and there's nothing particularly jumps out. so I'm interested to see how that goes. I mean, I think we've got 11 paragraphs. It hasn't struck me as a text that is going to be that informative, but I'm interested to see how it
Well,
goes.
let's see. Let's see. Yeah. So there's always a depth. Each paragraph, each sentence has meaning.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean,
What an extraordinary book.
Oh, it is. It is. And the detail. I mean, you know, the amount of dedicated effort that must have gone into just the simple I mean, the production of it. I mean, is quite is very, very impressive.
We have
light. I see you've got light.
Back. So that's good. I wonder if
I can kind of hear an echo in the background, but our screen has frozen.
I think Jonna's screen might have frozen.
Okay, so you're there, Kim.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm moving, right? I can see you moving. Yeah.
Have you moved to Cape Town for work purposes, Kim?
It was triggered by that for my husband. That's how it all started. Then anyway, we thought it would be a good change for us. So even if like his work no longer required it, I'm lucky because our bigger office for my company I work for is in Cape Town, and I could just do a direct transfer because I've got clients in both cities. So and just because of COVID as well, like the clients I would have previously expected to see me every week in Johannesburg, we got so used to working remotely. So if I have to fly up and see them, but I haven't actually, I mean, I'm on, these Teams calls almost on a daily basis with some of them, but we actually haven't seen each other for almost 2 years. So yeah, I could just do a direct transfer, which is great. And I thought, yeah, I think it'll be good. It's good for us.
Good place
lifestyle change and also like a different environment stimulation wise.
From what we saw of Joburg and Cape Town, I'd very much prefer Cape Town.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone would, but there is quite a lot going for Johannesburg. I mean, I was born and grew up in Johannesburg. The weather is great like here, but there is quite a lot of the wind factor in that. For some people they have to get used to. The Johannesburg weather is like the climate is fantastic, and there's a lot of greenery, especially in the older parts of Joburg. There's so many trees. I mean, they say it's the biggest man-made forest in the world. It's like look, Cape Town's probably got a lot more to offer on your doorstep, but there's things about Johannesburg as well which are good. And yeah, maybe it's easier for me to say because I've spent most of my time living there, for a couple of years in the UK and then on the like in a town near the east coast of South Africa. So I probably when I'm going, sometimes when I think, why didn't we move here sooner?
Where were you in the UK?
In London. I did that. When you're in your 20s and we all go over there. It was a lot of fun and to work and travel and that. But I mean, I can go back there. I've got a British passport. I've got the British heritage. My mum is from there. She's actually was born and grew up in London, and my father's parents, one of them was from Liverpool and the other one was from Yorkshire. So
Okay.
Yeah. So you never know, we might end up coming to the UK one day.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, but one step at a time. We're still trying to move here.
Yeah.
We're in the process. Yeah.
Cape Town has the coast, of course, which is
Yes. Coast, the mountains, the winelands close by. So there's a lot of variety that's close by, which that's really great. Yeah. And a lot of people have been moving here over the years as well. So there's aspects of it is more expensive than Johannesburg. Like I think that like your rent in a nice area is you probably pay more than like equivalent in Johannesburg, for instance. So it's going to be interesting to look for a place that's in a reasonable level. But yeah, I think there's other things that it offers as well. So looking forward to that.
All right, sorry about that.
No worries.
Trying to switch to Wi-Fi, which doesn't seem to be working. So we're just back on the old. We're back on mobile signal. Hopefully we'll be all right.
I was also like last night towards the end of the session, I just kept on getting dropped. So I think in this part of the house it seems better so far.
Okay, so I'll start the recording again because it's just dropped me out. Okay, and so where were we? We were on second paragraph, I think, of 19. So Sue, do you want to read that for us?
Today, we are again emphasizing the fact that minds are joined. This is rarely a wholly welcome idea at first, since it seems to carry with it an enormous sense of responsibility and may even be regarded as an invasion of privacy. Yet it is a fact that there are no private thoughts. Despite your initial resistance to this idea, you will yet understand that it must be true if salvation is possible at all. And salvation must be possible because it is the will of God. I think the thing that strikes me here is where it says, it seems to carry with it an enormous sense of responsibility, which I do feel because, if our thoughts are being picked up by the person we're thinking about, for instance, then we've got to be very careful what we're thinking.
Yeah, which in a way is a good thing. It's vigilance. It's like, so I'm thinking this thought, there are no private thoughts. This is going into the quantum field, the mind, the morphic field, the quantum field. It's all the mind, and it's happening on the domain in the level of thought. So just because you think you're physical and you've got a body does not mean your thoughts are private or separate. This is what he's trying to teach us. How can you really have private thoughts if you're a mind? And there's really only one mind.
Yeah. And I've experienced,
it's a fact that there are no private thoughts.
I've experienced times where I'm sure other people have known what I'm thinking. Happen.
Well, there's things like telepathy and telekinesis and these kinds of, which really indicates there's a connection on a mind level, and this is verified. There's scientific proof experiments that have been done of this idea that minds are joined. That we do know. They've done telepathy experiments with people who sometimes hundreds of miles, thousands of miles apart, and the one has an object and the other one focuses and says, I can see, the object is this. You're feeling this, you're touching it. There was a telepathic parrot. It's Rupert Sheldrake did some work. Be holding an object, and then a parrot could speak and say, "Oh no, that's not ball," and it was extraordinarily accurate, like 95% accurate. So just there is evidence of this, that there is really only one mind. We are connected on a mind level. This is all he said. So there are no private thoughts because we're all connected on a mind level. So you think you're thinking these private thoughts, but it's actually going out, and the nature of thought is to either extend or project out. So it is going into the quantum field, and it is having an effect. Of course, negative thoughts create their own likeness, and so do positive thoughts create their own likeness.
Yeah, I've been told sometimes, someone like Leland, my husband, sometimes goes, "What was that?" I'm thinking, does he hear me?
Because you're thinking something.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of picking up on your thoughts.
Yeah, perhaps.
We all have it. I think animals are much more tapped in to it. They just do it naturally. So if you watch a flock of birds, just watch a flock of birds flying. Why are you laughing?
Because just as you said that, a dog barked. You could hear a dog bark.
Yes, interesting. Yes. No. Interesting. Is that in your house? Yeah.
Not in our house, no.
Is that your house?
It must be here, because there's one outside here. So you can actually hear through my AirPods.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, we
Okay.
need the wool. So animals, like they've done experiments. Rupert Sheldrake done experiments with animals, talking of dogs and cats. So they've monitored the animal at home, and when the owner makes the decision to leave work and come home, then the animal knows, and it goes and it starts waiting by the gate
Oh,
for
wow.
the owner to come back.
Amazing.
And they did this over and over, repeated experiments. There's no way that the animal could have known when the owners made the decision. They did it randomly. They said, okay, well, today you're going to leave at 3 o'clock. Today you're going to leave at 5. And as soon as the decision was made, when the owner said, okay, I'm leaving, and they're packing up and they're walking out the book, then the animal goes, okay, owner's coming home, starts waiting by the gate. Even though the owner's coming back in half an hour's time, the animal knows through the intention. So they did those experiments, and way more statistically significant than random probability, way more, that they picked up that these animals know. And there was a telepathic parrot, that just knows what its owner's got in its hand. And it's like 95% accurate. Just can say like, okay, yes, you're holding an orange, you're holding a ball, because it can speak. So then it can speak its thoughts. And then I was saying with birds, you watch a flock of birds, and when they wheel and they change direction, they all go at the same time, don't they? It's not like one and then a second or two later the others go. It's simultaneous. They go as one. So that it's got to tell you they're tapping into the same mind, and they make the decision at the same time. It's one mind that's governing the flock. And so these are demonstrations of this idea that there are no private thoughts, that there's a collective mind. And we as human beings, we're probably the most separated species on the planet, because we somehow think we're individual. And most animals know they're not individual. They're part of the herd, the flock, the pod. You watch dolphins as well. They go as one. You watch them when they hunt sardines. They go as one. It's extraordinary, the coordination. Because they're doing it, and they're different sides of the sardine thing, and they just somehow know that they're all going to work together, and they're going to herd it into, and there's no, I suppose they can communicate, but it's happening so quickly that it's too slow for the communication to be through the clicks and whistles in the water. It's like it's happening telepathically. They just tapped into the same mind. And so we have the same ability, but we've denied it through our individuality, through our sense of being an individual self. That we don't allow this idea to, we prize our private thoughts and our individuality, and so we disconnect ourselves from the idea that yes, there's only one mind. And this idea of private thoughts, well, you don't really have any private thoughts in truth, because we're all one mind. And this actually was one of the primary rules that, David Hoffmeister's community, the Living Miracles community, they have these monasteries and so on set up. And when they're living in community, they have two rules: no private thoughts and no people pleasing. So don't have private thoughts, because the private thoughts then create the separation and they create the dramas. And no people pleasing means, don't try and play those manipulative games, pleasing people. Just be yourself. Those are the two rules. Okay, so any thoughts on paragraph 2?
Have you been to one of David Hoffmeister's, John? Have you seen that in action?
Have I been to his centers in the US?
Yeah. I just wondered if you'd seen, those two principles in action.
No, I haven't. I haven't lived in community with it, so I only know people who have. And they had mixed feelings. The one guy was like, "Well, this, it becomes cultish, and there's quite a lot of control of people of what you should be doing, and so on." So,
I mean, they are.
I'm not really
very similar to principles that used to be at Findhorst.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe Lucy can comment on that. Lucy?
Yeah, hi. What you mean? You mean the sense of community, no private thought, sharing, being kind of transparent, more transparent. Yeah, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody about that today, in view of the lesson today. And yeah, something that we both noticed was that there might be a bit of a tendency in that vein to focus on, almost like the permission has been given to focus on the more negative aspects of life. And I wondered whether, because there seems to be a polarity, I notice a lot in Fintorn, between sharing, when the sharing deeply comes, often people haven't had the opportunity in their previous lives or their growing up lives, and so Fintorn appears to be the place to kind of bare your soul in a sense, and as well as the kind of exhortation and the sharing and the loving and the, there is that aspect. There is also, I think, what shows up more is the despair and the suffering and the, it seems they're both more visible. But today, because we're used to kind of going, oh yeah, I'm fine. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. It feels so unusual almost to be in that place where people will say actually how they're feeling, and it's not fine. It's not. And then quite what to do with that somehow, what to do with that information. So that's one piece of today, that a conversation I had. And the second is that we had this gathering for our friend, and there was something about really what came of it was really celebrating what we're living, how we are, who we are now, or how we show up, celebrating each other. But like when I remember when I first arrived here, Jono, in the session, and we were at the beginning, and you were really kind of Ray, like giving people a good cheer. And it's like, wow, when you have that cheer, really it changes things. You're like, yeah, I do have the courage. I do feel I'm more able to meet that challenge or to move forwards in my life. And And there was something of that today through, I suppose, what could have been grief, and the grief mixed with the, we're one mind, we are, this person is free, and for us living in life, let's celebrate each other. Let's just make time to celebrate the journey and not be so indulgent in the suffering parts, and getting kind of like, woo, sort of bogged down by it. But I did actually, before I was on my way, I fell on the ice and cracked my elbow, and I'm like, whoa, what's that all about, that I wasn't conscious? And somehow, I'm just trying to apply the course to what I'm feeling in my body at the moment. Being kind of more conscious of sensation. So I could call it pain, but if I call it sensation, has a different flavor to it. And an opportunity to really just tune in to that part of my body and breathe with it. Actually, feels really good. Feels really good. And Ho'oponopono actually would be really helpful.
Yeah, so we'll do, I'll take you into a meditation if you like. We'll do a bit of breath watching, body scanning, which is the basis of the Vipassana. And just to observe, if you observe the sensation without attachment, without judging it as pain, it's very helpful. Because your mind just stays in that equanimous state, and you start recognizing that pain is an interpretation. There's a sensation going on, but how you interpret it is up to you. Okay, so shall we do a meditation? How does that sound?
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, really good.
Just making yourself comfortable. Sitting with your feet shoulder width apart, or standing. Feet shoulder width apart, cup your hands in your lap or hands by your side. Standing up, back straight, close your eyes. And start off with a nice deep breath in through the nose, so breathing in. Noticing how the stomach rises and the chest rises. And the subtle flow of air in through the nostrils. And you clench your sphincter muscles, the muscle you use to contract the flow of urine or squeeze the last drops out. Lock the energy in. Draw the energy up the spine, into your stomach, into your heart center, into your upper back, into the crown of your head, pausing at the top of the inhale. Nice deep inhale breath. And you're just going to scan your mind. Notice any thoughts going on. Repeat today's idea. Say, I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. And as you notice each thought coming up, just name it in terms of the central person or theme it contains, and holding it in mind, say, I'm not alone. I'm experiencing the effects of this thought about whatever it is or whoever it is. Another thought arises, repeat, I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of this thought about whatever or whoever. And as you exhale, you can just release any attachment to these thoughts. They're just like clouds drifting by in your awareness. Just releasing them to the nothingness they really are. Just a thought. Nothing of substance there. So you blow it all away to the nothingness that it really is. And find some stillness and some peace in the gap between breaths, in the gap between my words. Just entering in to the stillness in the gap. So breathing in again, noticing how the stomach rises and the chest rises. It's a subtle flow of air in through the nostrils. Just pausing at the top of the inhale. Smile. And scan your mind. Notice any thoughts, any emotions, and any sensations. Whatever's arising, just say this thought about whatever it is or whoever it is. I'm not alone in experiencing the effect of it. I'm not alone in experiencing the effect of this thought about whatever or whoever. And then you just let it go like a cloud, just drifting by. Has no true power to obscure eternal light in your mind. So just breathing in and out through your nose. Observe the breath flowing into the nostrils and out of the nostrils. Observe the touch of the breath, the area just below the nose, between the nose and your lip. So you're completely present in the present moment. This presence arises. Find your mind relaxing, letting go of thought, and just surrendering to the presence. Presence of stillness, pure formless awareness, just arising naturally in your mind. So just surrender to that, sink into it. Observe the breath, just watch the breath. You notice how the breath just happens to you, through you, and for you. Breath is just breathing you. There's no conscious stressing, straining, or striving. Just watch it and see the pure witness, the observer. Find a sense of peace arising in that. Peace that passes all understanding. Has nothing to do with intellectual understanding. Deeper with each breath, to the still, calm, quiet place. In your mind, the very core, the very center, your own true awareness. Beyond subject-object thoughts, beyond the world. It's a stillness in your mind that is, has, and always will be true. And just feel yourself surrendering into that. So keep observing the breath, part of your awareness. So I want you to observe the body So starting at the crown of your head, observe the sensations in the body and do this equanimously. So there's no need to think about anything you sense. Whatever the sensations are, you just observe them without judgment, without interpretation. This is what equanimity means. So notice the feeling in the crown of your head, notice the feeling in the back of your head. Maybe there's some tingling, some itching, prickly feeling, heat. Just tune into these subtle sensations, observe them. You're the observer, not the observed thing. You are not the sensations. You are not the emotions. You are the observer of them, the pure witness of them. So just observe them from this equanimous perspective, which opens your mind to the true self. Notice sensations in your neck, your face, your jaw first, teeth, your mouth, your ears. Just bring awareness to these areas you don't normally have awareness on. Observe. So observe the sensations in your neck and your shoulders. If you notice any tension and tightness, just breathe in to that area and you feel a loosening. As you exhale, release out through the nose. And there you feel a kind of a tingling sensation. You release some of the tension in your neck and shoulders. Notice what's happening in your arms, your upper arms, triceps and your biceps. Notice what's happening on the surface, the skin, and then also penetrate into the arm. Let's go from one side to the other. Down through your elbows, to your forearms, rest your hands and your fingers. Feel the weight of your arms pressing down into your body. Be aware of how they're feeling. Bring your awareness all the way back up from the tips of your fingers, through the back of your hands, the palms of your hands, through your wrists, forearms, elbows, triceps and biceps, up into your neck and shoulders again. Breathe in. Got another chance to let go of any tension there. So notice any tightness, any tension that you're holding in your neck and shoulders. And then as you exhale, just sigh it all out. Drop the shoulders down, release. Maybe you feel a little bit of release of energy, a little bit of tingling, warmth. Just observe the sensations autonomously. Just no judgment, no interpretation. Just noticing what's arising in the body on the surface of the skin, and then go beyond that, go beyond skin deep. Maybe you notice a subtle flow of energy, life energy, just flowing through into the upper back, to your chest, to your middle back, your stomach, to your lower back. Oh, nice. Maybe a soft, warm, heavy feeling in your stomach. Observe the sensations inside and on the skin. Just keep watching your breath at the same time. There's just this breath awareness going on in the background. Breathing gentle, soothing breaths in and out through your nose. So observe what's happening in your buttocks, in your groin. Just run your awareness through those areas into your upper thighs, quadriceps, the back of your thighs. So run your awareness from one side to the other. To your knees, to your shins, calves, down into your ankles, feet and your toes. Feel the weight of your legs just hanging completely heavily off your body. So your whole body is completely limp, heavy, warm and relaxed. So run your awareness through, again from the tips of your toes, breathing in. Noticing the sensations in your toes, your feet, ankles. And just breathe in, continue breathing light in. Maybe that's just a feeling, maybe you visualize light into every pore, every cell of your body. To your calf, your shins, to your knees, to your upper thighs, back of your thighs, groin, buttocks, your stomach, breathing the light into your stomach. And into your chest and your heart center. It's an open, expansive feeling. Visualize light, golden or white light, flowing into your neck and your shoulders, again relaxing those. Feel the light just dissipating any tension. Exhale. Release that tension. And this light flow into your arms, down through your triceps and your biceps, into your elbows, through your forearms, underside of your forearms, your wrists, your hands, your fingers. Feel this presence, this weight, maybe heavy, warm, relaxed feeling. Observe these sensations. Breathe in again, run your awareness, draw the light in through the fingertips, through your hands, wrists, forearms, elbows, upper arms, to your neck and shoulders. Breathing into the neck and shoulders. As you exhale, release any tension you're still holding there. Draw the light into head, the back of your head, into the crown of your head, through your face. Relaxing your jaw. So you Another sip of air in, just hold the breath briefly and zoom out. Just notice your entire body in the light. It's vibrating with this light. And you simultaneously observe the sensations, observe the flow of energy, observe the vibrations, observe the feeling in your body, holistically as well as specifically. You notice any particular parts that are tall tights. Just breathe into them, breathe in the light, and feel this darkness dissipating as you bring in the presence of your true awareness. So you just observe all of these sensations of the body, observe your breath. So nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, nothing else to think about. Just breathe, relax, and be still. Just sinking into the light. Letting go and letting God, bringing pure formless awareness. Observe the body and use the body as a portal to go deeper into the mind. Nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, nothing else to think about. Just breathe, observe the breath, relax, be still, and surrender into the light for a couple of minutes of deep silence. coming back to an awareness of the body and the breath and the senses and the world. And on the count of 3, you're going to open your eyes. So 1, just breathing in, noticing how the stomach rises and the chest rises, subtle flow of air in through the nostrils. Pausing at the top of the inhale. Scan your mind. So remind yourself of whatever thoughts are arising. Just name it in terms of the central person or theme it contains. Hold it in your mind as you do that and say, I am not alone. And experiencing the effects of this thought about whatever it is or whoever it is. And then exhale, release, just letting it all go. Surrendering it all. Notice how the air flows out, chest and the stomach. Suck back in. And as she subsides back down into your lower stomach and groin. Exhaling it all out, noticing the weight of your body, pressing down to the chair, feet touching the ground, noticing what you feeling and touching. Maybe there's a subtle taste in your mouth, a smell in your nose as you breathe in. Notice that. Notice what you're hearing in the surrounding environment. Just noticing all these things from the same quantumist perspective. So no interpretation and no judgment. It means you can just observe all of your sense perceptions. And you find there's a peace, equanimity, it's called in the Buddhist teaching, to underlies all of these sense perceptions. And this is a very peaceful state of mind, which you can maintain even while you're engaging in the world. So we train our minds in the meditation to go into the equanimity, to the light, to use another word, and simply not judge. Do not judge your sense perceptions. And then you just are able to observe them without all of the mental and emotional interpretations that the ego likes to create to make up the meaning that is given to the world. So, on the count of 3, you're going to open your eyes. Just take a minute to look around, noticing the various objects in the room. Remind yourself, do you really see no neutral things? So remind yourself, I do not see a neutral whatever it is because I have no neutral thoughts. So it's a previous lesson, but it's appropriate for an open-eyed practice. So just randomly scan the room, look at a few objects. Don't try and select them or avoid anything, just whatever happens to cross your eyes. Remind yourself. I don't see anything neutral because I have no neutral thoughts. And if there's any thoughts arising about any of the objects, remind yourself that I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of this thought about whatever it is. So notice how you're feeling, pretty calm, pretty detached. Nice, calm, peaceful. Watch your breath as we go through this text reading, which we'll dive straight into. So let's unmute everyone. Okay, so let's go into the text reading, which is section 2, chapter 4, entitled The Ego and False Autonomy. So, John, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. The ego and false autonomy. It is reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. There is, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past, because the past does not matter. And history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. Abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal, and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. So I think this is an interesting paragraph. It's reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. Well, that's
that was the question you were asking yesterday.
Perfect.
It's absolutely perfect that you're reading this.
So we've had that one. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. There is, however, this one confuses me a bit. There is, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past, because the past does not matter. Okay, I get that bit. And history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. I'm just struggling to get my head around that. History would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. So it's a double negative, which always throws.
Be frozen. What's happening?
The history exists. So that means the history exists because the same errors are being repeated in the present. History exists because the same errors are being repeated. Well, that's certainly true. Abstract thought. I mean, I
think it was Churchill or someone said, history is just one bloody thing happening after another. And so we keep repeating the same errors, and then the story of time, which we call history, just carries on because the errors are repeated in the present. If you actually let go of your errors, then you'd get off the timeline and you'd go back into pure formless awareness. And this timeline, which is history, would not exist anymore.
Yeah.
If we didn't repeat the same errors.
Yeah. They have an interesting radio program here about where they take a current situation and they draw a parallel, like from somewhere in history, and it's quite interesting. It's very interesting how the same errors
related to the past situation.
Yeah, and it's just amazing how the stories just re-emerge. misunderstandings keep re-emerging.
Which is what he's pointing out here. These errors history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated now, because it keeps the story going. The errors keep the story of the ego and the timeline going. If we really correct the errors, we go to take our minds back to God or love or pure formless awareness, then an eternity, there's no time. Time just disappears. So this is what he's referring to. And then he says abstract. Do you understand that? Abstract thought?
I kind of get that on one level in terms of abstract thought. So abstract as in pure thought applies to knowledge, because knowledge is stable. Knowledge is
It's completely impersonal.
And it's completely impersonal. Yeah.
There's no personal self in knowledge. Examples are irrelevant to its understanding. So he's referring to this domain, abstract thought. So that's pure thought. There's no subject-object dualistic. I subject perceive this object. That's not the case. It's just a pure awareness of itself, and it needs no examples. It is what it is. Examples are relevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete.
Yeah, which kind of just, and it makes sense. It's just useful to see it written down in this way. And perception is specific. Yes, okay, because I am perceiving that this is happening, therefore I am whatever, and therefore quite concrete. So concrete is meaning rigid.
Yeah, and it's tangible, concrete. You have an idea. Okay, it's something solid, concrete, tangible. So we focus on specifics. So this is, if you look at the timeline, we want to focus on the specifics of each situation and make it into something that's concrete.
Yeah. So major adult trauma, e.g. messy divorce, it becomes lots of perceptions around that.
Yeah.
Make it all very, very concrete.
And so it becomes concrete and it becomes real in our perception. And all of this is designed to make our false identity real. The more we attach to these specific concrete perceptions of events, the more we are rooted on the timeline, the more we believe that we are really a person. There's a personal self that's experiencing all of this, and the personal self can suffer, and the personal self can die, and the personal self can desire and can fear, and all the emotions of the ego go along with the timeline, which is the domain of perception. And he's trying to take us above that into knowledge, which is abstract, and it has no reference. It doesn't need examples. In this pure formless awareness, there's just awareness. That's all it is. No examples, no perceptions, no duality. So this, in a way, answers your question of yesterday.
Yes.
Saying it's the best question you could ask, but in the end, you must go beyond things like the past and the construct of time and space to answer it. You're only going to get the answer from knowledge, and not from the domain of perception. Perception involves time, so it involves past and future. Okay.
Why did you put dementia on that diagram, John? I'm just having a question next to that. Because dementia is kind of an illness.
Yeah, well, it's just something that can arise. You know, you don't necessarily need to get dementia, but often people do. So if you look at where this all leads, it's not a particularly pretty picture. And this is the idea is to look at the timeline honestly and say, is this really something that I would consciously want to sign up for? And the answer should be no. They're just examples. I thought otherwise it's too abstract. You know, on the timeline, it's useful to be specific and say, this could represent someone's average life. Okay, this happens to people. All these events, circumstances, and at each point in the timeline, you can get attached to it. You can go down into the ego psychological emotional attachment. Go, oh, this is terrible. Why is this happening to me? And you really make that into something concrete and specific that defines you. Some people define themselves by their first major rejection, and for the rest of their life, that's how they define themselves. But at each point, you have the opportunity to let it go, forgive it, and return your mind to pure formless awareness. In which case, it really doesn't have any power over you. And you can carry on the journey, but without all of the heaviness that the ego is trying to create and putting you onto the timeline. Okay, so number 2. Kim, Lucy seems to have dropped off, so can you read number 2 for us, please?
Everyone makes an ego or a self for himself, which is subject to enormous variation because of its instability. He also makes an ego for everyone else he perceives, which is equally variable. Their interaction is a process that alters both because they were not made by or with the unalterable. It is important to realize that this alteration can and does occur as readily as when the interaction takes place in the mind, as when it involves physical proximity. Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as is physical interaction. There could be no better example that the ego is only an idea and not a fact.
Okay, so does anything stand out for you there? Anything you're not sure of?
The way it's described is that, they say, so it starts with everyone makes an ego or a self for himself. So we have these supposedly separate egos, and the one interacts with another. They're both they're variable and unstable. And I think number 4, it is important to realize that this alteration can and does occur as readily as when the interaction takes place in the mind, as when it involves physical proximity. So it might be, I think, in this world, we in physical proximity with each other maybe, but there's also alteration that takes place in the mind as well. So it just seems that there's this instability going on and change, which is the total opposite to, it's the opposite to like the oneness, which is no time, and that there's this ego, there's this perception of the ego being unstable all over the place, separate. One is interacting with the other, it's unstable, and it's not really, it's not, well, it says here, there could be no better example. That I'm not quite sure about that last sentence. There could be no better example that the ego is only an idea, not a fact. I think that is true, but based on the rest of the paragraph, I'm not quite sure how it fits into how the rest of the paragraph is describing what's going on, which I interpret as this variability and instability. Yeah. Or maybe that's just how it is. It's this unstable, variable.
And quite appropriately, it's saying your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, seeing that a lot recently.
Yeah,
except for today, thank goodness.
So that's the instability of this world. Everything here is unstable. It's not knowledge, it's perception. We make up these false selves. We interact with each other, and there's all this variation in our own perceptions and other people's perceptions. Then they interact in relationship, and this is all very variable. It's not unalterable. It's not eternal. Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as is physical interaction. So you can think about someone, they're not physically present, and you can have an emotion. You can feel angry, you can feel upset, you could feel compassionate. You can think about them in certain ways. They're not here, they're not physically there, and yet you have a perception and you have an emotion as a result. So there could be no better example. The ego is only an idea, not a fact, because it's entirely in your mind, and it's got nothing to do with the physical. Just in the mind. Okay? Happy with paragraph 2? Let's move on to number 3. So, Sue, I think you've been blocked out by your cat there. So. She wants your undivided attention. Let's ask Lucy if she wants to read.
Yeah. Your own state of mind is a good example of how the ego was made. When you threw knowledge away, it is as if you never had it. This is so apparent that one need only recognize it to see that it does happen. If this occurs in the present, why is it surprising that it occurred in the past? Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, though hardly to something that occurs with such persistence. Do not forget that the mind need not work that way, even though it does work that way now. So I'm looking at, the surprise, why is it surprising that it occurred if it's occurred in the present? Why is it surprising that it occurred? So is he?
And it occurred in the past.
So is he saying the surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar? And the unfamiliar being the oneness thought, the thought of love, the thought of is it like, is what he's saying that the pattern of thinking in duality is so familiar to us that it's a surprise to have that thought of oneness, or that thought of when you threw knowledge away. So is he talking about that we kind of oscillate between knowledge or wisdom and kind of reverting back to the ego's thinking, and that the ego's thinking is actually more?
He's referring to this separation. When you threw knowledge away, decided we would deny this and go into this thought of separation and go down the ladder of separation. We threw knowledge away. That's what he's referring to. So it's the separation or the fall.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. It's interesting that
it is as though you never had it.
Yeah.
hide it so
yes,
thoroughly that it's as though we never had it, and
yeah,
we've forgotten it. Almost we've
yeah.
hid it.
Mm, mm.
And
Yeah,
now,
I noticed that the comment I made earlier when I first arrived in the call, I was talking about Fintorn, and I was really aware that one thought, one experience was one of oneness, and the other one was really of ego. And I was like, just in that space between there and now, I've been like, oh my God, that was just a really good example of that, you know, where the knowledge is thrown away and it's like, oh, going into some story about how things are, and actually it's not true. It's only true in my mind if I want it to be. So yeah.
he's saying the ego is very persistent.
Yeah.
How
So
it occurs with such persistence.
yeah, it's like a piece of elastic, isn't it? It just kind of goes boom back there.
Trying to pull you back and just recycle itself in another way. So, you know, people come to Findhorn, I guess there's more openness, so then they express more, but then they express ego as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which can be helpful if it's really an expression that's designed to heal. You know, it's an expression session, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to get this out, I'm trying to release it, but it's very easy to go into, oh well, I'm just going to complain and moan and bitch because I can, because people will listen. Oh, great, okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Ego loves that. All right, well, let me just really, now I've got ears because they need to be spiritual, they need to be listened to me. So now I'll juice the, you know, the victim story and the sympathy for all it's worth, because I've got people that actually listen to me. So you got to be really vigilant and just
You
see
got to
where
be really vigilant, because for me it's the way, it's my response. And it could be the other way around, it could be me being the victim, you know, but it's the response, isn't it? It's how we take that in, how we, without absorbing the negativity of that, and still being a mirror of love, without kind of spiritually bypassing and being too sort of airy fairy, you know, which is the other way as well. That happens, is just kind of going a bit happy clappy and sort of like,
spiritual
oh,
bypassing. That's another word.
yeah.
David Hoffmeister used the term metaphysical ghosting.
Oh yeah.
And it refers to just ghosting over the top of everything, saying, oh, well, it's all illusion anyway. So, you know, we won't thoughts and emotions and these patterns because it's all illusion. So it's fine. So we're all, you know, it's just illusion. But you haven't actually gone in and looked at it and experienced it and then let it go. So that's, you know, you use the term spiritual bypassing. Quite like that. Or metaphysical ghosting. You're not really getting to the core of it and looking at it deeply and saying, okay, well, that might mean I need to experience it. You know, there's a bit of pain there. I need to re-experience it, but it's so that I can release myself, so I can let it go. So if you're in a community like that, I guess you need to be quite vigilant yourself with, you know, how you're behaving, and also with others. If they're sharing, it's like, okay, is this actually helpful? Where's this going? Or they're just sharing because they're complaining, they're bitching, and they're moaning, and actually it's just there's no attempt to move through it. Or, you know, can this actually be healing?
Yeah, that's the tricky bit, is actually it's just not an easy kind of like A or B, you know. It's very nuanced, and but I think the exposure to the number of people, it certainly gives an opportunity to meet my own ego in each situation. You know, it's like, okay, am I triggered by something here? And yeah, how does that sit with me? And also just giving a lot of energy to an awful lot of people is exhausting, you know, as there are so many people around here. So kind of retaining the energy as well.
You're muted, Jono.
Sorry, I keep getting knocked out. So I've just switched connections for whatever. We've had a lot of rain, so the internet's unstable for whatever reason. Let's go back in there. Okay. So Lucy, I missed the last bit of that. Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy. I think I also got knocked out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay, so move on to number 4. Sue,
Think of the
read
love
number
of
4 for us.
Think of the love of animals for their offspring and the need they feel to protect them. That is because they regard them as part of themselves. No one dismisses something he considers part of himself. You react to your ego much as God does to his creations, much as pure formless awareness does to its creations, with love, protection, and charity. Your reactions to the self you made are not surprising. In fact, they resemble in many ways how you will one day react to your real creations, which are as timeless as you are. The question is not how you respond to the ego, but what you believe you are. Belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin is open to belief, you are regarding it from an ego viewpoint. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know God. You will merely know pure formless awareness. Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. That is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self.
Okay.
That's interesting, that last bit. So belief there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. So that's kind of the highest point that the ego can get to before one-ment, I suppose, before enlightenment.
Well, before the spirit comes in and says, actually, none of this is true or real. The spirit takes over in any situation where you say, okay, there's another way of thinking about this. And then the other way of thinking would be, okay, I can let this go. It's not real. That's now, the ego can't do that. The Holy Spirit does that.
Right.
Oneness does that. So in a way, this is a shift. If you look at, what's happening on this timeline and in this descent into hell, on the one level, the first tier of this is awareness of that's okay, there's another way here. So something happens, you've got guilt arising, fear, whatever's happening in this red scrum. The ego can have an awareness that there's another way of looking at this. Right? And then the second part is, okay, well, to look at it correctly, you simply deny its reality. That's the Holy Spirit. The ego can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's the Holy Spirit's reinterpretation, saying, okay, well, none of this is real because the thought of separation from which it came is not real. And only the Spirit can do that, because the Spirit knows that only knowledge is true. So in forgiveness, you're working with the dynamic of both. There's the ego, okay, so that can bring you to the point that there's another way of thinking about this, which opens you up to the reinterpretation of the Holy Spirit to come in and then reinterpret that situation. Okay, so anything else there stand out for you? Telling us that we react much as God or love does to its creations, love, protection, and charity. So we've made up a self, and then we cherish it, and we nurture it, and we support it. And then interesting, it says belief as an ego function. As long as your origin is open to belief, you're regarding it from an ego viewpoint. Does that make sense? So as long as you question. So John, if you're asking these questions, well, how did the ego happen? Why did the ego happen? You're in the domain of belief still, not knowledge.
Mm.
Belief still questions and doubts. That's what he's referring to.
Sentence number 6 is just kind of, in fact, they resemble in many ways how you will one day react to your real creations. So creations are of spirit, which are as timeless.
Mm.
So that implies that almost we're going to be, oh, no, okay. Yeah. I was just wondering if it implied a sense of attachment. But these words
One
are
day react to it.
is with love, protection, and charity.
Yeah.
So the ego is like a mockery of the truth. It's a simulation, a false version, a fake model of the reality. So how we respond here to our ego is just a taste of how you one day react to a real.
We've lost you again, John. Are you there, Lucy?
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Do you understand what he means by creations?
What I think he means by that is acts of love, or creative acts of music.
Well, no, he's not. It's not act, because it's timeless, which are as timeless as you are. So he's referring to the timeless domain.
It's the truth of who we are, is it?
Yeah.
Real creations.
And so, yeah, that's when we experience love and peace and joy. We experience these timeless states, and those are real creations.
Oh, okay.
No. So they're not acts because they're timeless. They're just states of mind, states of being in our mind, which exist as timeless states. Okay, so anything else? Yeah, any questions on this? Should we move on?
Yep.
Maybe well, let's Sue, can you give us a quick summary of that? Give us a 30-second summary. It's the key takeaway.
So the key thing is that when we nurture ego because we've made it as to be ourself. We nurture it, love it, protect it, which is how we're going to be when we realize the truth of who we are, when we realize that our state is love and joy, and we will then be nurturing that.
And this idea of belief, that belief is an ego function.
Yeah, and when we let go of ego,
Teaching is no longer necessary, or merely know God. So it starts off with belief, and belief there is another way of perceiving. It's the loftiest idea which ego thinking is capable. So that that contains a hint of the recognition that the ego is not the self. And then the ego will normally get quite defensive and try and shut that down. But that's as far as the ego can go.
I'm even surprised that the ego gets to that, really, that it can conceive of another way.
Well, I think it comes when you're desperate. It comes when there's enough pain.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm in too much pain. I can't stand this anymore. There must be another way.
Yeah.
And you could argue that's the Holy Spirit coming in and saying, yes, there's another way. But the ego allows that in, I suppose. It's capable of thinking, okay, yes, maybe there is another way of doing things. And that's as far as it can go. It can't actually let go of its beliefs. It can only just say, well, yeah, maybe there's another way here. So the Holy Spirit comes in, and then this knowledge of oneness comes in and reinterprets it and says, okay, yes, you can let this go because it's not true. The thought of separation is not true. So nothing that the ego believes is true. And that's knowledge. And that must come from outside of the ego, because the ego only believes in separation. It only believes in what happened post the separation thought. This is the domain of consciousness, as Jesus defined it. Your consciousness relies on the idea of separation. And so it cannot go beyond that. Only the spirit can do that, because the spirit knows that only oneness is true. Okay, so let's move on to number 5. I'll ask.
It's probably me.
Is it you again? I think it is you, John. Yeah, because you read the list.
Yeah. Undermining the ego's thought system must be perceived as painful, even though this is anything but true. Babies scream in rage if you take away a knife or scissors, although they may well harm themselves if you do not. In this sense, you are still a baby. You have no sense of real self-preservation and are likely to decide that you need precisely what would hurt you most. Yet whether or not you recognize it now, you have agreed to cooperate in the effort to become both harmless and helpful, attributes that must go together. Your attitudes, even toward this, are necessarily conflicted, because all attitudes are ego-based. This will not last. Be patient a while and remember that the outcome is as certain as God. So I think it's just stressing here the strong attachment, well, the difficulty of letting go, or the apparent difficulty of letting go of ego thoughts. We imagine that they are going to be painful, they're going to be costly, we can't possibly do that or this. And likens it to caring for a baby. I like the encouraging statements at the end. This will not last. Be patient a while and remember that the outcome is as certain as God, pure formless awareness.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the last bit. Just internet connection's unstable.
Yeah.
You want to give us a little summary of that?
So we have this, well, the ego thinks that giving up whatever it is attached to is going to be painful. And that may well be the case to a certain degree initially. But giving it up, but we don't really know what is good for us when, well, we certainly do not know what is good for us when we are coming from ego, and we imagine that we need all sorts of things that actually we don't. Yes, it likens it to looking after a baby. And the final outcome is as certain as God. I think baby's screaming rage is, because it has the, gets the right imagery. We are screaming with rage.
I go, I want it, I want it. I want my toys that are hurting me. And he's just saying, this isn't helpful. It's all attitude, ego-based.
Number 5 is interesting to me, and I don't quite get it. You have agreed to cooperate in the effort to become both harmless and helpful. Who have we agreed that with then? And
who do you think?
Attributes that go together. The Holy Spirit.
It's your own agreement to listen to this voice. So yes, I want to do this. I want to cooperate in the efforts of this spirit, this remembrance of pure formless awareness to help me to become both harmless and helpful. Attributes which must go together.
Because the antithesis of that is in the sentence before that, and yet, no, and are likely to decide that you need precisely what would hurt you most. So it's like that ego's intention is hurt and harm. And even if it looks like it's going to be real pleasure, in the long run, it's not. It's just empty. It's like empty calories.
So it's actually hurting you. Desire, what you think you desire. If you keep desiring it, that creates addiction, and that hurts you because you've now got a pain in your mind continuously because your addiction is not being met. And he's pointing that out and saying, well, you want to be both harmless and helpful, and these are attributes that the spirit can give you that go together. And then be patient a while. Remember, the outcome is as certain as God or pure formless awareness. It must happen. It will happen, he's saying. Inevitably, eventually, you will restore your mind. So as we're going through this, there's a temptation to want to speed it up. Say, okay, this has got to happen quicker, but saying just be patient. It's a process, and just trust me, trust the Holy Spirit. Go through this process of unwinding the ego. And it will happen. It's a done deal. Outcome is as certain as God. It's quite reassuring. Okay, so moving on to number 6. I think it's Kim.
Okay. Only those who have a real and lasting sense of abundance can be truly charitable. This is obvious when you consider what is involved. To the ego, to give anything implies that you will have to do without it. When you associate giving with sacrifice, you give only because you believe that you are somehow getting something better, and therefore do without the thing that you give. Giving to get is an inescapable law of the ego, which always evaluates itself in relation to other egos. It is therefore continually preoccupied with a belief in scarcity that gave rise to it. Its whole perception of other egos as real is only an attempt to convince itself that it is real. Self-esteem in ego in terms means nothing more than the ego has deluded itself into accepting its reality, and is therefore temporarily less predatory. The self-esteem is always vulnerable to stress, a term which refers to any perceived threat to the ego's existence. So this is always the challenge. I'm getting a meowing cat here. It's probably like, thinks it's like, it wants to get something. It feels a sense of lack. Okay. I mean, this again, it comes down to that feeling of scarcity, which the ego, I mean, it's one of the operating programs of egos. It feels if it gives, it can give something, but in the notion of feeling that it's going to get something in return.
Sorry, Kim.
It's gone. No, it's that ego's operating program. That feeling of lack or scarcity, stress, and it means if it's going to give up something, it thinks it's going to get something in return.
So the belief in scarcity is its foundation. So it's one or the other. The way the ego works, it's I get something, someone else loses. It's a win-lose mindset. Someone must lose. Not everyone can win. If I get, someone else must lose. If I lose, someone else wins. And if we look at how this world works, that's largely the principle on which it's based. Even to the point of eating. We eat things, so something else must die so I can live. That's how it works. Something else must give up its life so that I can live. So one or the other. So that's the scarcity principle that's entrenched in this whole illusion. It's one of the foundational principles of it.
Number 8, self-esteem in ego terms means nothing more than that the ego has deluded itself into accepting its reality and is therefore temporarily less predatory. It's temporarily less predatory. Like, why would it? What's the difference?
So this self-esteem in ego terms could be called pride or arrogance. So someone can puff themselves up and they can go, aren't I great? And I'm feeling quite good about myself in ego terms, usually because of something I've done, my accomplishment, my possession. And so you'd be at somewhere in the region of pride, pride. So pride is temporarily less predatory, but if you drop down from pride, then it's very easy to get angry. And then the ego becomes predatory again. Because actually that the source of the pride is not true. Still ego, self-esteem. So if you look at the personal growth movement, a lot of what they're suggesting is related to achievements. It's related to external stuff that's going to boost your self-esteem. Now you're going to be, if you feel better about yourself because you achieved something, because you made money, because you have a great body, because you have a good relationship, and so on. But it's very vulnerable to stress because it's related to these externalities. If you don't have those, then that whole self-esteem bubble can easily get pricked, which is why pride is just above anger. So you might notice that people who are very full of themselves, they have a lot of pride, will get angry quite easily. Because if you just start pricking the bubble a bit, they drop down into the lower level and they'll get angry. And then the ego becomes predatory again, as he says, because anger is really murder. It's predatory. It wants to kill someone. So projecting your anger out, and this is a term which refers to any perceived threat to the world. It's any perceived threat to our ego's existence. That's what stress is. So there's fear. Fear and stress go hand in hand. The ego fears that its existence is being threatened, that it's going to be done away with. And that's his definition of stress. So this kind of spiritual program can create ego stress because it fears that its existence is being threatened. Quite rightly so. So this self-esteem in ego terms isn't really anything. It's just more illusion. So if you're trying to become a better false self, that's never going to work, is it? It's never going to give you a true sense of peace and contentment. And that true self only arises when you're willing to completely let go of the ego with all of its ways. So this idea that you can, become a better self, a better false self, it's a starting point. It's a starting point, so I don't knock it. But at some point you've got to let that go and say it's not really about.
Maybe John is frozen again.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting knocked out. Okay, so Kim, do you want to give us a quick summary of that paragraph? Key points.
I think if the ego is in the ego's world, if it's going to sacrifice something, if it thinks it's going to get something, or vice versa, if it's someone else is going to get that and it's going to lose it. So that's it's the way it operates. And when it goes into a slightly better level in terms of self-esteem or pride, it's temporarily less predatory because it's more accepting of that that level that it's at, but it's still vulnerable to if it's vulnerable to stress, it can still drop into a level of anger, for instance. If there's any perceived
if its
threat.
reality is not true. So if you feel very proud in your accomplishments, it's like, oh, you know, I'm proud because of what I've achieved, of what money I've made, achievements, possessions, these kinds of things. It's very easy to drop down into anger, because if someone goes, oh well, actually, I don't value accomplishments, and they say something, and you're invested in that, then you'll very quickly get that stress will drop you down into anger, and then you get angry with the person. How dare they say that? You know, like I'm gonna sue them for defamation, this kind of stuff, because it's an illusory self based on an illusion, and you haven't really connected with who you are. So this scale kind of illustrates that quite well. Okay, number 7. Moving on to Lucy.
The ego literally lives by comparisons. Equality is beyond its grasp, and charity becomes impossible. The ego never gives out of abundance because it was made as a substitute for it. That's why the concept of getting arose in the ego's thought system. Appetites are getting mechanisms, representing the ego's need to confirm itself. This is as true of body appetites as it is of the so-called higher ego needs. Body appetites are not physical in origin. The ego regards the body as its home and tries to satisfy itself through the body. But the idea that this is possible is a decision of the mind, which has become completely confused about what is really possible. So the ego is so identified with the body that the qualities of equality and charity are just beyond it, because it's just very fixated on the getting concept, of kind of, I suppose, feeding the body, the appetite of the body, because the body is associated with needing nourishment and food and appetite. So it's always got to be this kind of like energy going in situation with the ego and the body.
Misidentification. So we've identified our minds with the body, and it's based on the belief in scarcity.
Yeah.
Think about all these body appetites based on the idea of scarcity. And so equality is not there. We believe now in inequality. We believe in scarcity. And so now, if I get something, I win, someone else loses. Right? So in order for me to have life, this is the ego's fundamental principle. For me to have life, I have to take life away from someone else. That's how it arose, right? We in order to have life, to start with, we had to deny the spirit. We had to deny God and say, well, for me to have life, I need to deny that God or love or oneness exists. That's the only way that I have an existence. So its foundation is the getting mechanism. I have and something else loses. Sacrifice is built in to the foundation of it. And then that plays out in the world in these ways.
So does that, the idea of eating meat or being a vegetarian or vegan, does that feed in at all to this narrative, or is that just another illusion?
It's all part of the getting mechanism. So what the ego has done is convinced us that we're bodies and that we need something else, whether it's vegetarian or vegan or meat, in order to live. So for me to live, I must eat something else. Something else must die. Whether that's an animal or a plant, in truth makes no difference.
Right.
Because it's all illusion. It's all part of this thought system that something else must give up its life, whether it's a carrot or a cow. In the end, it's part of the same thought system. And then the ego goes, oh, well, a carrot is better than a cow. Is it really? Are you sure? Is it all just part of the same illusory construct that something must die in order for me to live? And so we make all of these distinctions artificially. And what Jesus is trying to get us to see is that all of it's artificial and all of it's part of the same thought system of illusion, that we somehow, like the mind now needs something. In order for you to live, if you don't have food in the ego's world, you die. I mean, what a fearful concept that is. So if I don't kill something else, I will die. I mean, talk about being deeply entrenched in the scarcity belief. And this is how, it works on the body level. And he's trying to get us to see this and say that these appetites are not physical in origin. Right? It comes from the mind. It comes from the belief in one or the other. In order for me to have life as an ego, God or love cannot have life, cannot exist. So I must deny this in order for me to exist. And that is the foundational principle of it. So now that plays out in this illusory world it's created all the time. For me to have life, something or someone else must die. I have to eat something in order for me to have life. And that's normal in the ego's thought system.
Can you hang on?
But
Can
it's
you
not
just go
normal.
back?
Yes.
Could you go back a bit, Jono? Because you said something about if I have to eat, then something has to die, and then I deny. What did you say? Deny God's
So
existence.
how did the ego originate? The ego originated from the idea that in order for me to have life, I have to deny God. I have to deny love or oneness or pure formless awareness. I cannot have a separate identity without denying this. So the foundation of its existence is denial, and it's a denial of something in order for me to have life. So this must die, God must die in order for me to live. See, there's the foundational principle. So now that principle gets projected out into the illusion, and now in order for me to live as a little body in my separated body ego state, something else must die. So now we create a world where other things must die so I can live. And whether we class that as animal or vegetable, in the end, it's the same thought system, isn't it? Something must die so I can have life. And so this takes that whole vegetarian, vegan, meat-eating debate to an entirely different level. So, well, actually, you think you're being spiritual as a vegan or a vegetarian, but it's the same thing. You're still attached to these body appetites that are not physical in origin. This is all happening in your mind. A deeply entrenched program, for sure. So we're not even aware of it, but he's trying to make us aware of it through this teaching. To say, but look, it's not physical in origin. It started in the mind because the mind split itself into two, and you had to deny something in order to have your identity. So now that becomes the foundational principle of your entire world. And you play that out over and over and over again in these appetites. And we try and satisfy ourselves through the body. But the idea that this is possible is a decision of the mind should become completely confused about what is really possible. So you identify with the body, you go, I'm a body, okay, I'll be satisfied when I get more of what the body needs. Food, drink, sex, pleasure in some form, however you define that. We all have our own little addictions, don't we? Oh, maybe it's ice cream for you, or maybe it's sex for you, or maybe it's shopping for you, whatever. And then we play these out. And we think that this is going to satisfy us, but actually all it does is perpetuate this victim identity, that we're really a little self seeking for these little scraps of pleasure, but in the end we're doomed, because in the end we're going to die. And so it confirms that the ego's world is true, which is why desire, as the Buddha noted, never works. The desire is the source of all suffering because it perpetuates the victim identity, perpetuates this whole thought system of sacrifice, guilt, fear, It's all part of it. It's all bound up in it. So when you think, oh, that's just an innocent desire, it's not at all. It will make you suffer because it perpetuates the ego's whole thought system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I just had another thought, though, that came on the back of that. So if you're then going into denial, so if you're going into denying whatever the pleasure is that you seek, that, you know, whether it's like lots of hugs from people, for example, like needing to hug, if you go into then denial in order to like sort of quell the addiction somehow.
Well, that's aversion. So craving
That's
and aversion.
Craving and
The Buddha
aversion.
notes that aversion is actually just another form of desire or craving, because
Yeah.
you're desiring it not to be that way. Oh, like I really want it not to be. Okay, well then you're averting it,
Yes.
avoiding it, and a strong aversion is the same as a strong desire, because you're making the thing real.
No.
So that's why the whole practice of vipassana is simply equanimity. Simply observe and don't react to it. Don't go into craving, don't go into aversion. So what you're training your mind to see is that this is nothing. These things are nothing, and they cannot actually affect your state of mind. Which is why there's the vipassana practice training you not to go, oh, like, I do want this, I don't want this. And either way, you're still making the illusion real, aren't you?
Yeah.
I strongly avoid something. Don't think of pink elephants. What do you think of? A pink elephant. It's a simple example, but no. I really, Patricia was saying the other day, I really don't want to be in a relationship with someone. I really don't want to be. The more you think that, the more aversion, the more there's an attachment to it, the more bound your mind is to that situation. When she said, I just want to be free of this, then it changes, because it's like I'm not craving or avoiding anymore. I'm asking for release. That's what I'm asking for. Because the Holy Spirit can do that. I'm asking for release from this. So it's tricky, but I mean, as you say, John, there's subtleties and nuances in this text that take you from this. That's why I like referencing these diagrams, because it takes you to the whole truth. It takes you back here. Keep referencing to the whole truth of what's going on. So is it speaking to you a bit more, John?
Yes, it is. Very much so.
Read it on your own.
Yeah.
Because there's actually a lot of depth in this. This idea that body appetites are origin takes you to the very core of the ego's origin, which is scarcity and one or the other. And so that's why I'm saying it's not physical in origin. It's actually in the mind, but it's got deeply entrenched. The mind has entrenched itself into the body. And so this is a deep-seated program, but now we have to undo. We've done it so thoroughly and enslaved ourselves so thoroughly in this thought system, and expressed it through the body in this world. And now, we have to reverse the whole thought process, which isn't that easy, because we think we are bodies and we think we have these appetites, and it seems like if we don't feed our body every few hours, we get hungry. And but that's why we do things like fasting. And so, because it just starts undoing that program. Start recognizing that I'm not actually governed by this program, that my mind can continue and I'm not enslaved by this. I don't have to honor this. And so you start detaching your mind from the body and the body's appetites. And that takes you back up the ladder into pure formless awareness, if you allow it to. So that's why some spiritual practices say, we'll fast or give up these pleasures, and don't have aversion to their rewards, and just recognize that they're nothing, right? Whatever the thing is that seemingly gives you pleasure, recognize that it's not really pleasure. It's just an addiction, and actually it's more of a cost than a pleasure. And so when you see it in that light, then you just willingly give it up, because you recognize that it's part of a thought system of falsity, sickness, scarcity, suffering, death that you don't want. It's all bound up. So does this give you a bigger picture? I don't know. I don't think I've actually been through this with you, Lucy, but it's worth.
Yeah, it's really thought provoking. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word. Now I think about thought. It's just my mind has just exploded. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not that I haven't maybe had these thoughts before, but somehow just in this context with the Holy Spirit, I think what resounds for me is really this letting it go, just being free of it, just asking Holy Spirit for help to be free of
Being free of
whatever.
all of it. You know, the Holy Spirit's intention is to take you back to pure formless awareness.
Yeah.
No form. There's no form in pure formless awareness. All of this disappears.
Yeah, this is it's worth being here, isn't it? For this in the many forms. Yeah, thank you. I feel like it just, yeah, I really want to bask in that last. Oh, he's off. Off
I
him
keep
again.
dropping out and back in. Okay, so
Yeah.
number 8,
Thank you.
quite a long paragraph, this one. So this is Sue, I think. Sorry, Sue.
Just don't ask me to summarize it.
I asked you to summarize it.
No, don't.
Maybe you want to stop at number 6, read half of it, and then we'll break it down into 2.
Okay. The ego believes it is completely on its own, which is merely another way of describing how it thinks it originated. This is such a fearful state that it can only turn to other egos and try to unite with them in a feeble attempt at identification, or attack them in an equally feeble show of strength. It is not free, however, to open the premise to question, because the premise is its foundation. The ego is the mind's belief that it is completely on its own. The ego's ceaseless attempts to gain the spirit's acknowledgement and thus establish its own existence are useless. Yes, he's saying that our ego, is not interested in oneness. It wants to try to unite with other egos in order to compare one with another, or to attack other egos.
Because it makes it real.
And
it's a belief that's completely on its own. So hence private thoughts, you see, related to the lesson. You believe you're on your own, you must believe in private thoughts.
Yeah.
The ego's ceaseless attempts to gain the spirit's acknowledgement, thus establish its own existence, are useless.
I think that's interesting, actually. The ego's ceaseless attempts to gain the spirit's acknowledgement. I mean, is that really saying the ego's ceaseless attempts to usurp the spirit? It isn't, is it? But why would the ego want to gain spirit's acknowledgement?
The spirit with a small s as well.
Yeah, interesting. So they do that in the course. For some reason, S, spirit, is small. But Holy Spirit is capitalized. So work that one out. I don't really. It's clearly pointing to the transcendent dimension, which is what then denotes. That's why we capitalize things. And the Spirit's acknowledgement. Anyway, maybe that's a little error in the capitalization.
I guess it's the ego's desire to get spiritual acknowledgement and therefore establish its existence, isn't it?
because the ego is desperately trying to be real, and it's not real. It never will be real because it's a denial of reality. And so it can try and do this. And so, you know, this is how, I mean, Lucy, you might have seen quite a bit of the spiritual ego, they call it. So people go along a path and they go, ooh, okay, so all the spiritual is
We've lost you, Jono.
sorry, keep dropping out. So
We lost you for a while there.
yeah, I was saying, Lucy, that the way this could play out in practice, you know, in this illusion, is that someone goes on a spiritual path, and then the ego hijacks that and goes, oh, well, now I'm the spiritual one.
Yeah.
And that's what we call spiritual ego. So the ego is trying to get the acknowledgement of spirit, but in fact, you can't do it because it's one or the other. So creating another identity for yourself, another separate identity as the spiritual one, the spiritual seeker or the spiritual guru or the healer or whatever it is just more ego.
Yeah.
Not actually really letting go and going, surrendering to the spirit in its knowledge. It's the ego trying to gain the spirit's acknowledgement and thus establish its own existence. And he's saying that's useless. It's not going to work.
Mm.
And so you probably observe quite a bit of that in Finn.
Is he gone?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, actually, thinking about Findo, I mean, Peter Caddy was probably
Yeah.
an example of someone who was spiritual and yet full of ego.
Yeah, there's a lot of in a community, you notice the power dynamics, the power structures, and sort of people kind of maintaining positions, and the need to be sort of to sort of have a spiritual identity in order to have a bit of clout. But it really wow, it's like when you notice that, I don't know if humility is the right word, but it's what comes to mind, you know, when you notice that just that real loving presence, and there is so much of that here as well, because it's like that's the goal. And yeah, I think Eileen, I mean, I never met Eileen, but I think Eileen probably carried that.
Yeah.
Did you meet Eileen?
No, I mean, I saw her on stage a couple of times, although she never spoke very much, actually. Peter always kind of took center stage. But she always emanated that, that essence of love. And
yeah. Oh, sorry, dog. Sorry.
That's what it's really about, is that the spirit is humble. Remember when I met David Hoffmeister the first time? It was such a sense of lightness. So quite amazing. I just got this, like, this guy's as light as a feather. It was so interesting. Because you go, there's no like solidity here, you know, there's not like a heavy ego at all. It's just like this light presence. And I came away from the interaction just feeling really light and uplifted, because there's nothing really solid there. You really get, you know, with enlightened people, you do get that sense. I mean, not that I've met that many, but you know, I guess he would be one. And it's just a lightness. Okay, am I freezing up again? All right. Sorry about that. I don't know how much you got that.
Yeah, we did. We got lots of. You were just saying your experience of David Hofmeister, the likeness of David Hofmeister.
It was very light,
Mm.
just like a light touch of a feather. You know, there was nothing solid about it. Nothing heavy. Couldn't like say this was a person even. It was such an interesting impression. And yet he was speaking, he was interacting, but there wasn't any sense of like any heaviness. And that's what really struck me. And that's what the spirit is. You know, there's no like self-identification. He's just in the spirit, and he's light, and he's joyful, and it's moment by moment. He's just interacting with whoever, and you know, you really got a sense. And then, interesting, there was another teacher from South Africa, and a very like quite a heavy, dark presence, and it was like the contrast between them. It was like, wow, just look at the difference there. What a lesson in these, you know, the. So let's go back in. So should we go into the second part of it too? Spirit in its knowledge. In fact, someone else can read that maybe. Give me a break. So Lucy.
Okay, where is it? Actually, hang on. Maybe somebody else, because the dog might whiff again. He's just got excited about something. Somebody else for now, please.
Yes. Okay.
Spirit,
John, yeah.
spirit in its knowledge is unaware of the ego. It does not attack it. It merely cannot conceive of it at all. While the ego is equally unaware of spirit, it does perceive itself as being rejected by something greater than itself. This is why self-esteem in ego terms must be delusional. The creations of God do not create myths, although creative effort can be turned to mythology. It can do so, however, only under one condition. What it makes is then no longer creative. Myths are entirely perceptual and so ambiguous in form, and characteristically good and evil in nature, that the most benevolent of them is not without fearful connotations.
Interesting. So any thoughts on that?
Yes, but yeah, there's a few bits to this really. Spirit in its knowledge and unaware. Okay, so we understand that spirit is unaware of the ego, and it certainly doesn't attack it. It merely cannot conceive of it. Well, the ego, it's interesting that the ego is unaware of spirit, but does perceive itself as being rejected by something greater than itself.
Yeah, before it said the ego's ceaseless attempts to gain the spirit's acknowledgement.
And yet it says, okay, so spirit doesn't attack ego, but ego perceives itself as being rejected. Interesting. Okay, that's the makeup of the ego, I suppose. It does perceive itself as being rejected. The creations of God do not create myths. The creations of God do not create myths.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to rabbiting on, really trying to work out where I'm going. The creations of God do not myths. Well, the creations of God are real, aren't they? So they're not myths. They're
creations of love.
Creations of love. They are. What was the word we used at the outset?
They are true. They exist beyond the ego's dream. They're timeless, eternal, certain. So we think of creativity as being these myths.
Although creative effort can be turned to mythology. Getting a bit lost in this now. We've got myths coming in, and
well, let's return to our diagram. Go to first principles. He's talking about myths are entirely perceptual. Okay? So any myth is happening in this domain of consciousness, of the separation.
It could be.
So we think it's creative. We create these myths, which are stories, really. They're stories to try and explain aspects of this illusion. And then he's saying, well, we create these stories, and they are entirely perceptual. They're in the domain of time and space. It involves perception, and they're ambiguous in form and characteristically good and evil in nature. But the most benevolent of them is not without fearful connotations. So all of these myths have the nature of duality built into them. Right? The hero's journey. This is the mythological archetype that Joseph Campbell studied. Built into the hero's journey is the light and the dark. Right? You have duality, the known and the unknown. You have helpers and guardians and mentors, but you also have threshold guardians who are trying to prevent you from awakening. And in all these myths, there's usually a lot of fear. The hero's got to overcome fear. There's these challenges and temptations. You've got to go through this whole story, and this is perceptual, right? It's all perceptual by its nature. It's not absolute truth at all.
And when it says threshold guardian, trying to prevent you going down the journey, I mean, that implies that a threshold guardian is an entity rather than an ego, doesn't it? Rather than one's ego.
Well, what happens is, because it's all projection, so the threshold guardian, let's say in the Matrix movie, those were the agents.
Oh yeah.
The threshold guardian is a projection of the ego, and it's a projection of your ego that's trying to stop you and trying to prevent you from awakening. It's that thought system that now gets manifested in the form of the guardian, which may take many forms. In the Matrix, it was the agents. It may take the form of a parent, a partner, a friend who's like, oh, no, you can't do that. No, forget that. You're never going to do that. That's not going to work. And they sow doubt, and they.
Yeah, we've lost you again, John. Are you still there, Lucy and Kim?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Still here.
Yeah. Oh, he's popped back in again. John.
Sorry, this is somewhat of a challenge tonight because my internet, I'm switching connections, but it doesn't seem to matter. I'm on a mobile, either mobile or internet is problematic. But anyway, I think we're nearly done. We're getting there.
Mm.
Okay, so John, do you understand the idea of myths? Why myths are completely perceptual?
Yes. Yeah, I get that they are perceptual. I get that they are of the ego. Yeah.
Because you're in the domain of time and space.
Yeah.
And they're good and evil in nature, the most benevolent of them. So even a hero's journey like Neo, because Neo's story in that Matrix became like a myth to them. Even the most benevolent of them is not without fearful connotations, because he had to go through, to really face the darkness, and he had to die, and all of this, and that's all in the domain of the ego, mythological system. So, and then he goes into the idea of myths and magic are closely associated. I'll read this one. Since myths are usually related to ego origins, and magic to the powers the ego ascribes to itself, mythological systems generally include some account of the creation, quote, and associate this with a particular form of magic. So-called, quote, battle for survival is only the ego's struggle to preserve itself and its interpretation of its own beginning. This beginning is usually associated with physical birth, because it is hard to maintain that the ego existed before that point in time. The more, quote, religiously ego-oriented may believe that the soul existed before and will continue to exist after a temporary lapse into ego life. Some even believe that the soul will be punished for this lapse. However, salvation does not apply to spirit, which is not in danger and does not need to be salvaged. Myths and magic, understand what he's saying there, the connection. Do you understand the connection between myths and magic?
I understand that they're both in the same area.
So they're both happening in the perceptual realm. They're both happening within this domain of time and space. Magic, we're trying to fix something in the dream. We're saying, my magic is gonna make my life better. And myths are attempts to explain what's happening in the dream through some kind of story. And of course, those stories make the dream real, because we get attached to the myths and we go, those myths are true.
Mm.
And the so-called battle for survival that's inherent in every myth. There's always a threat to survival. There's a threat of death in every myth. It's only the ego struggle to preserve itself and its interpretation of its own beginning. Because the ego began with the denial of life. So its existence is very unstable, and it's not based on any true foundation. So he's pointing that out here. So therefore, in these myths, we have all these ideas of battle for survival, and this is related to the ego's struggle to preserve itself, interpretation of its own beginning, because it began with the denial of life itself. That's how the ego began. So of course it's going to be a struggle to maintain your existence if you deny the very essence of life itself, and that's the foundation of your existence. Beginning is usually associated with physical birth. Okay, so you're on the timeline. It's hard to maintain the ego existed before that point in time. Although the idea of karma seems to indicate that we had previous lives, but most people find it hard to do that. So we tend to think of our life as beginning at birth, which is not true either. So the more religiously ego-oriented may believe that the soul existed before and will continue to exist after a temporary lapse into ego life. So we believe there's something else. Soul exists, and we have this temporary lapse, which can open us to the domain of the spirit. But then we have these beliefs that some even believe the soul will be punished for this lapse. However, salvation does not apply to spirit, which is not in danger, does not need to be salvaged. So he's taking us out of this domain of time and space, entirely into the spirit, which is synonymous with God or love or eternity or pure formless awareness. And this does not need to be salvaged. It's pure and complete and whole unto itself. So the idea of being saved from anything doesn't even enter into it. Okay. So any questions about paragraph 9? Can you give us a little summary of that, John?
Well, I think it's all about myths and magic and the whole egoic story trying to self-propagate itself. And well, the battle for the ego to survive, I suppose.
And those myths get that's why the myths have this duality and this struggle to survive, because it's representative of the ego's struggle to preserve itself in the face of really overwhelming odds. So that then makes its way into these myths. I mean, if your whole entire existence is based on the denial of life itself, I mean, talk about overwhelming odds that you're up against from the start. And that then just gets put into the myths of this world that express this struggle to survive. That from the start, because the ego is not true. That's its foundation, and that just gets perpetuated in all these myths. Salvation does not apply to spirit, so he's again taking us up out of the dream into this, where there's no need to be saved. You simply are that. Okay, so any questions on number 9? Shall we move on to number 10? So I think Kim, if you can read number 10, and then Lucy can read number 11, then we're done.
Salvation is nothing more than right-mindedness, which is not the one-mindedness of the Holy Spirit, but which must be achieved before one-mindedness is restored. Right-mindedness leads to the next step automatically, because right perception is uniformly without attack, and therefore wrong-mindedness is obliterated. The ego cannot survive without judgment and is laid aside accordingly. The mind then has only one direction in which it can move. Direction is always automatic, because it cannot but be dictated by the thought system to which it adheres. So the salvation is kind of the next step.
So to go to our diagram again, what he's saying is that right-mindedness still happens within the domain of perception. So we reinterpret whatever's happening here, that's right-mindedness. And then that leads to the one-mindedness of the spirit, which is perfect oneness. So this is the domain of miracles, right-mindedness, correcting perception, healing our minds, leading to the eventual one-mindedness, which is where our minds are totally one. There's no belief in separation anymore. That's disappeared.
So the right-mindedness it's kind of that one step before one-mindedness. So it's still, there's a sense of separation, but it's not operating the ego way. So it's in the right-mindedness. So it's not attack, it's not judgment.
So you're letting go of all of that. And although you're still perceiving that there's these things happening in your world, apparently outside of you, you're perceiving them correctly, because you're not honoring the ego's thought system. You're not believing in its beliefs. You're correcting that and saying, look, none of this is ultimately true, and I can actually find peace no matter what seems to have happened on the level of form. And so that takes you systematically back to oneness, because where else can you go? If you keep thinking about oneness and saying, this isn't true, only oneness is true, that's going to lead you back to oneness, to one-mindedness, where there's only one thought, there's only one idea. So that's our task. While we're in the domain of time and space, it's right perception to correct our minds as these things show up, to forgive them or let them go, release them, so we don't believe in the thought system that's behind them. And as we do that, we are restoring our mind progressively and systematically, climbing the ladder back to oneness, to the point where eventually God takes the final step, the thought of separation disappears, and we are back in oneness. The at-one-ment is complete. And that's the one-mindedness he's talking about. There is no conception of another mind. This direction is always automatic, because it cannot be dictated by the thought system to which it adheres. Right? So if you keep letting go of whatever shows up in the dream, then the direction is automatic. You will go back to oneness, because there's nowhere else to go. So all you have to focus on is, let me let go or forgive whatever shows up, because then I'm making the journey back home, which is quite simple. Sorry, did you have a question?
No, I'm just saying it's a good paragraph.
Did you have a question, Kim?
No, I'm just saying it's a good paragraph.
Yeah. This is actually summarizing the whole journey. If you reference it to this diagram, he's telling you this is what it's about. Right-mindedness is correcting all of these misperceptions. I'm going to add in arrows here. I need some blue arrows here. So there's a bit of space. Add in the arrows so that you're moving back. Whenever you correct a misperception, you're moving back from the separation to oneness. You're climbing the ladder. So he's summarizing this whole journey back. The way home is this right-mindedness, to take you back to one-mindedness. Okay, Lucy, just in time. Last paragraph, will you read it for us?
So where am I reading from? Because I missed that whole bit.
Number 11.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers actually. Let me do it from here. I'll do it from the phone itself. Number 11, which is, it cannot be emphasized. It cannot be emphasized too often that correcting, it cannot be emphasized too often that correcting perception is merely a temporary expedient. It is necessary only because misperception is a block to knowledge, while accurate perception is a stepping stone towards it. The whole value of right perception lies in the inevitable realization that all perception is unnecessary. All perception is unnecessary. This removes the block entirely. You may ask how this is possible as long as you appear to be living in this world. That's a reasonable question. You must be careful, however, that you really understand it. Who is the you who are living in this world? Spirit is immortal, and immortality is a constant state. It is as true now as it ever was, or ever will be, because it implies no change at all. It is not a continuum, nor is it understood by being compared to an opposite. Oops. Lost the page actually.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It just keeps internet. Keeps dropping me in and out. We're nearly there. We're nearly there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm stopping and starting because I'm flicking it along, having to flick it along on my phone. Spirit is immortal, and immortality is a constant state. It is as true now as it ever was, or ever will be. Or ever will be, because it implies no change at all. It is not a continuum, nor is it understood by being compared to an opposite. Knowledge never involves comparisons. That is the main difference from everything else the mind can grasp. So it's just whatever is ego just is not, it's not real. There's no argument. There's no having to compare. And perception is an illusion. And so the block is like believing that the body is real, and that that there's this kind of like bodily life that you lead, and then there's a spirit life, and they're two kind of separate things. And what he's pointed to here is that actually the body life is not.
It's not real.
That there simply is only spirit. That's it. That's the enduring truth. And knowledge never involves comparison. It's just spirit. It's just with the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
So it takes you out of this whole domain. Knowledge takes you out of the scrum of this red ocean of all this stuff going on, just back to the pure isness of your being, of who you are, which is what he's saying here.
And then what you were saying about
who is the you who are living in this world.
So then what you were saying about David Hoffmeister was that the very lightness of that of that being that is spirit. It's spirit. So we're kind of like, where I get caught up. So if the body's not real and I'm experiencing David Hoffmeister as a body, as a spirit with a body, because so my perception of him is incorrect, that he's a body.
I think he's a body, that's not correct.
As well as a spirit, not a spirit and a body.
But not both. It's not both. This is the fundamental teaching of the Course. You can't be both. How can you be a body and a spirit? And most spiritual teachings fudge it, and they say, oh, well, you can be both. There's the body, there's the mind, there's the spirit. It's all part of the greater whole. It's all real. Jesus is saying it's not true. If the body is real, then the spirit is not. The body is a denial of the spirit. The world is a denial of the spirit. It was made from a thought of separation, the denial of the truth. So it's one or the other here. If you think you're a body, then you deny the spirit. You think you're a body, and you think you have another identity based on the body, which is very fearful because the body is going to die.
Oh yeah, okay. So if you think you're a body at all, you deny the spirit, you deny God, you deny.
pure formless awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's saying only this is real and the body isn't real. And in order to restore your mind to its true home, you must deny the body ultimately, and the reality of the body's world, this illusion. You must let it all go and go into pure formless awareness. It's formless. There's no body in formless awareness. And the body is not necessary. It's not required.
So we were talking about the other day about the need to, we from this perspective of, whatever we kind of consider life to be, that we need to look after ourselves. We need to look after ourselves in such a way that we have the energy and the vitality to be able to meet what Holy Spirit is asking of us, is to live a harmless life and a loving life. So I get that I'm not a body, but I'm looking after something that's an illusion.
So you faded out a bit there. You say that again.
Okay. So I'm looking after something. So I need to look after this body so that it has energy for this process of undoing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the body becomes as he says in Jesus' words, a healthy, serviceable instrument, which is useful as long as you're in time and space.
Yeah.
And then is laid aside when its use is done.
Got it.
So use is done once you've corrected your mind. Why would you want to hang on to a body? I mean, it's like there'd be no reason to do that. You actually want to go into pure formless awareness. So treat the body well, not because the body is real, but because it's the vehicle that's going to take you home. You need to have a body in order to experience what you need to experience here, to learn your lessons, which will take you home. So if the only way home is through a vehicle, you're going to make sure that vehicle is going to be serviced, and it's going to be looked after, and it's got petrol or diesel in it, and it's got its water and its lights, all of that. Before you go on a trip, you're going to do that, aren't you? So in the same way, our body's just the vehicle. You don't go, oh, I'm valuing the vehicle as my identity. You don't say the vehicle is me. That's a delusion. So people identify with their cars, and some people do. It's a delusion. You're not your car at all. But you've attached your mind to the car. It's the same way we attach our mind to the body. We go, oh, that's my body's real. Oh, now my body's aging. Oh, now I feel like less than. I feel like my existence is being threatened because the body's aging and it's clearly going to die. But if you just see it as a vehicle, then you go, well, it's fine. Just let me keep it in tip-top shape for my journey, so that it gives me it can help facilitate my experience, my learning experience, so that I can make this journey all the way up the ladder. Because it's going to take some doing. You're down at the bottom of the ladder. You got to climb up. It's going to take some effort and some perseverance. And if your body is sick and not capable of doing that, then you're going to struggle. So look after it, but not because it's real. Look after it because it's just the dream vehicle that's going to carry you out of the dream and take you back home. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear me.
You
can. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Hmm.
That makes good sense. Yeah.
Can you give us a little summary of the last paragraph?
Not sure. Let me just see if I can look at it again.
It's the key takeaway, 30 seconds. What's he saying there?
He's saying the body's not real, the perceptions are not real. Yeah, I think my mind has gone into, I've gone into slightly into shutdown. I'm looking at it because I'm looking at it with, I'm on my side with my elbow, and
Right.
I'm going between. I've got a small light. I'm going between my phone and
Well,
my book.
let's ask your buddy to help you out. Iona?
Oh, Iona, yeah.
Wow.
No, I'm freezing up.
Okay, seeing I came in, I'm on my phone as well, and I came in halfway through Lucy reading the chapter.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to help her out here? Can you summarize the last paragraph for us?
Can I summarize the last paragraph? Correcting perception is merely a temporary expedient. The body is this amazing vehicle that carries around a spirit and should not be used lovelessly. If we identify with the body, then we are, this is a misperception. This is a temporary vehicle. Spirit is immortal. The body changes, the spirit doesn't. I'm just going back to the first sentence. It cannot be emphasized too much that correcting perception is merely a temporary expedient necessary because a perception is a block to knowledge, and knowledge is spirit. Knowledge is pure formless awareness. So we can correct a perception, but it's just a stepping stone towards it. So you can't have either or. I mean, you can't have both. You either completely accept the at-one-ment, and there you are, totally the extension of pure formless awareness. That was longer than 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well done. Kind of dumped you in the deep end there.
I know. I was aware of that, and I was just arranging my flowers here, thinking that I'll just check in for the last 10 minutes. Better late than never, and Lucy's doing well.
So it's a good summary of this. He's saying, look, this is a temporary expedient. To correct your perception is temporary. It's not the ultimate aim, but it's necessary in order to escape from the dream.
Yeah.
So having corrected perception is not the end goal. In the end, you're going to let go of perception entirely, and you go back to knowledge, which is timeless. It's not a continuum. There's no opposite to it. It's not on a timeline, and in fact has nothing to do with perception at all.
Yeah.
Which is quite transcendent. So there's many spiritualities that will say, no, actually our job is to become better human beings. And we want to become just, like amazing human beings, like super beings. But in the world, we're still stuck in the world. And we'll keep coming back because, the world needs bodhisattvas or, avatars to come back and help it. And Jesus is pointing us beyond that conception entirely, saying you're going to go back into the spirit completely.
Yeah.
And you're going to let go of the entire domain of perception. And so who you think you are living in this world is not true. It's a sham. The identity that thinks it's in this world is just a false identity.
Yeah.
You may ask how this is possible as long as you appear to be living in this world. That is a reasonable question. So kind of the question John was asking yesterday. You must be careful, however, that you really understand it. So who is the you who are living in this world? Because if you define yourself as that you, then it seems to be impossible. How can I go to spirit and also be the you who's living in this world? Well, the answer is you can't. You must choose. The spirit is immortal. If you merge your mind with getting knocked out. Okay, so any questions on that? Any questions on that section? Anyone like to summarize the whole thing? There's a challenge. What's the key takeaway in 1 minute of this text? I mean, there's quite a lot in it. It's quite hard to summarize in 1 minute. But I mean, for me, the key message is: look, this world is a temporary expedient. The body, the domain of perception, are temporary expedients, and you need to just correct your perception of them. Be right-minded in the way you perceive them. Okay, so any questions on that?
Well, you dipped out quite a lot, so it was brilliant, but unheard.
Okay, I'll try again. Hopefully it won't knock me out. So what it's saying is effectively that we are in this domain of time and space, in the domain of perception, and our job is to be right-minded, to correct our misperceptions, and that is the way out of the dream. It's only a temporary expedient, though, because ultimately leads us to the one-mindedness of knowledge, which is beyond perception. It's beyond all of this, and in that we are, then we come into awareness of who we truly are, and we are not this character that's playing the game of time and space. That's not who we are at all, and all the myths and the magic that are associated with this perceptual realm are simply not true. We let go of all of them and free our minds into the knowledge of perfect oneness. So this non-dual teaching transcends pretty much every other spiritual teaching, every other method of personal growth, because it's taking you entirely beyond the entire domain of perception, but doing it in a doable way, because we have to start somewhere. So saying, well, you need to correct your perceptions and become right-minded while you think you're here, because you're not just going to go back to knowledge straight away. So it's a very doable system. If you just said go to revelation and there was no means in between, then it would be difficult. But he's saying, no, you can correct your perception systematically. You can train your mind, which is what we're doing with this course, to perceive more and more correctly, to take you back to one-mindedness, ultimately, and escape the whole dream. Okay, well, I guess that brings us to the end of the session, unless any questions or comments. Maybe let's ask John. John, so what revealed itself to you there that you didn't see? Did you hear that question?
I think what I heard was what revealed itself to me that I didn't understand.
Yes. Yes. Was there anything else that sort of really showed up for you in this when we did it tonight?
I think what struck me most was this concept of right-mindedness leading to what's it? One-minded. And I guess I think it's also the discipline of staying with right-mindedness, and a statement about it being a long journey, but it's kind of necessary to attend to do the long journey. Not a quick fix.
Yeah.
I can never understand why more people aren't doing the course, actually.
Because it's not a quick fix. It's not easy.
Yeah.
That's why. Because what the ego wants is some kind of quick fix. Oh well, let's go into magic and let's try and fix this. And so, what typically works in this domain, personal growth, is like, well, I'll show you how to make money. I'll show you how to have a dream relationship. I'll show you how to have a designer body. These kinds of things, and that sells because people are like, oh yeah, I want that. That's just magic. They don't really want to be told, look, your entire dream is an illusion. The character you think you are in this dream isn't real. Your entire life is a fiction. It never really happened. I mean, whoa, that's quite a that's a radical message. Not everyone's ready to accept it. You have to have done some journeying with this. Generally people have been on a spiritual path, they've been searching, and then they come to this because they're ready, because they've done their own journeying, and maybe they realize, look, I've tried everything and nothing else has really worked. I've got glimpses of something, but I'm wanting the truth now. I'm tired of this game of make believe. And they're just feeling that, and then then they're ready. If you're not ready, then the stuff's just going to go way over your head. It's not going to resonate.
I guess I understand why a lot of the Christian community struggle with it, but I don't understand why there aren't more Buddhists following the course.
Well, they have their own path.
Yeah.
So like, what was your friend's name? I can't remember who you referred.
Phil.
Phil.
Oh yeah.
So Phil has his own path. He's in a system. There's a practice already. He's involved in it, and it's like he's going, there's only so much time. I don't have time to do that as well as this.
Yeah.
So then he defaults to what he knows. Okay, well, this. I mean, Nichiren Buddhism has its benefits, no doubt. It has helped people. But is it going to free your mind entirely? No, based on and I understand it quite well, because Deborah was a Nichiren Buddhist, and I went to some of their meetings, and I discussed it with her, and I understood the teaching. And it's really a teaching that leads you to maybe the top here. Okay, so you're going to be a kind of a better ego, but it doesn't lead you out of the dream. It's not a non-dual teaching. Like, yes, you're going to keep coming back as the bodhisattva, reincarnating as this self into this transcendent domain of God or love or oneness. So it's not a non-dual teaching. Because non-dual, it's difficult. The ego doesn't want to accept it. The ego wants to hold on and fudge it and say, well, I can keep my ego and I can also be spiritual. And that's what the ego wants to do. So I think that brings us to the end of the session. Unless there's anything else, Kim?
No, it's like almost midnight here.
I know. Yeah. Time out.
Yes.
All right. So just do a 1 minute closing. So take a nice deep breath in, close your eyes. And just breathe in the spirit that this text is referred to, spirit of life, spirit of love, that has guided us here. It's guided us through 3.5 hours. So well done for staying till the end. You breathe it all in, you embrace it, you feel its presence in your heart, in your mind. Feel the gratitude for it, that there is this divine presence that is permanent, eternal, stable, always there. Perceptions ultimately take you back to one-mindedness, being one with your source, which is what we all really yearn for. That is our heart's desire. So you took another step in that direction today. Well done. Give thanks for that. Give thanks for the mighty companions on the journey who joined us. Give thanks to the people in your life, to, in fact, everyone. You give thanks and you bless and heal everyone in this world. As you exhale, extend that out. Feel that love and gratitude shining out from you. And as you give it, you receive it. So anchor the state in your mind. Let it carry you into bed if you're going to bed for the rest of your evening and on into tomorrow. So it is said, and so it is done. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you, everyone, and namaste.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Sunday.
Good night. Bye.